Hi guys, Nick Bosco here, and today we'll be talking to James Wilks, the maker of the documentary The Game Changers. You can see the film right now on Netflix, or you can rent it on iTunes or Google or wherever you watch your videos. It's about James, who is a former UFC fighter. He won the Ultimate Fighter. He had an injury. He was trying to come back from injury and find the best way to recover, and he found this plant-based diet. So he decided to change his diet from eating meat to a plant-based diet, and the story is about his journey and how he found this diet to be optimal for performance for athletes, and it's a really good story. So right now I'm going to talk to him about just how he got to this decision to change over to a plant-based diet, what this means for other athletes and fighters, and what been happening since he made the movie and what's going to be happening in the future. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for doing this. It's awesome.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
I watched the movie several times. I saw it when it first came out, and then when we set up this interview, I was like, oh, let me watch it again real quick, and it's awesome. Like I told my whole family to watch it. So just like a quick, I guess, your background real quick for how'd you get into searching for the different kind of diet, and what made you choose plant-based?
Yeah, so I was, first of all, I'm a combatives instructor for, the military and government agencies, things like that. But I also ended up fighting in the UFC after winning the Ultimate Fighter. And then I was training for one of those fights, and I got injured sparring with Fabricio Verdum, who went on to win the heavyweight title. And he had, like 80, 90 pounds on me when we were sparring. Anyway, I tore ligaments in both of my knees. And I knew there'd be 6 months where I really couldn't train. So I thought, what can I do that's productive with my time? So I started doing research into nutrition for recovery and optimal performance. And that's when I came across a study about the Roman gladiators. So they analyzed the bones. They did what's called a strontium calcium analysis and a radioisotope analysis. And they could tell they were eating, largely, predominantly a plant-based diet. And I thought, well, that can't be true, because to be an athlete, to build muscle, you need a lot of animal protein. And so that didn't convince me, but that got me sort of looking into it. And, it turns out that the animals are just the middlemen. You can get your protein directly from the source, from the plants. And so I just started really digging into it and seeing benefits of plant-based diets, from health to athletic performance.
I mean, since the film has come out, I think the reception has been really good. I mean, you would know more than me, but the film was #1 on iTunes when it first came out. Since it's on Netflix now, a lot of people have been watching it. Have any pro athletes or fighters that maybe you didn't know beforehand reached out to you after seeing the movie?
Yeah, we've had a lot of athletes, gold medalists from the Olympics, NFL, NBA, some UFC guys, all reaching out, interested in improving their performance, right? Because people are realizing that, diet can give you an edge. And so we've had a lot. I don't know if I can really name them, because the HIPAA Act and working with our dietitians, unless they sign a paper to reveal who they are. I don't think we can mention that. But there's some that have been open about it on the web. And yeah, then in terms of the reception, I mean, it's been overwhelmingly positive. We had over 1.5 billion media impressions, over 35,000 press articles written about the film. And interest in plant-based eating more than tripled worldwide within a week of the film hitting Netflix, according to Google Trends. So it's definitely had a huge impact, and both for athletes, but also just for non-athletes as well.
I mostly talk to fighters in my line of work, so I know many of them, surprisingly to, I guess, a lot of people, these are professional athletes, but a lot of them don't have the greatest diets. A lot of them are, they're weight cutting, so they just cut down significantly on calories and stuff like that. How does switching to a plant-based diet affect the actual weight cutting process?
Yeah, I mean, it can definitely have a big impact depending on what your goals are. So, I mean, one of the good things about a lot of plant-based foods is that they're sort of calorically dilute. They're not dense in calories. And so if you focus more on sort of whole grains, legumes, which are beans, peas, lentils, fruits, vegetables, that type of thing, you're typically going to lose body fat, because you're not going to be over-consuming calories. On the other side of things, if you're trying to gain weight, you might want to be eating more nuts and seeds, or nut butters like peanut butter or almond butter, dried fruit. Those are going to be more calorically dense. And then also, sodium is really a large issue with cutting weight. I saw Jorge Masvidal before his fight on that private plane over there eating a pizza. And given that he took the fight on 6 days' notice and was already overweight, that was a pretty bad idea, because consuming that much sodium like a couple of days before the fight, now you're storing a lot more water. You've got to get that off, and in doing so, you're just not going into the fight with with your best body, basically. If you've had to cut that much weight, I think you cut from like 193, so 23 pounds. That's a lot of weight cut. So a lot of people are eating junk, but shifting over for athletes, it definitely can help with weight cutting. But I don't think it's like it's not like a silver bullet for weight cutting. If you're having a bunch of plant-based foods, but you're also having a ton of, like, if you're taking like canned goods with tons and tons of sodium, that's not going to be easy. So really it's getting to a sensible weight beforehand with fat loss, and then cutting what's reasonable in water weight. And that really is largely to do with sodium, and also glycogen stores. For each gram of stored of glycogen, you're going to be storing 3 grams of water. So you just got to be careful with that.
That's a good point too, because some people might think like, oh, a plant-based diet just means no meat, so I can just eat like pizza and all this junk. But like, you really need to focus on what kind of food you're taking in also. Not cutting out meat is just not it.
Yeah. It's not just what you're not eating, it's what you are eating, right? And so, and this term plant-based, we're not, first of all, that doesn't necessarily mean go completely vegan or even go vegetarian. Excuse me. The important thing is, in my view, is to have the vast majority of your diet coming from whole plant foods. So, legumes, whole grains, nuts and seeds, fruits and vegetables. Those types of things are going to fuel the body and give you the protein that you need, but also, food is a package deal, right? You don't just eat protein, you get all the macronutrients. If you're starting to eat soda and cookies and, white flour and that type of thing, a lot of the time, that's not going to fuel you in a good way. So eating more whole foods as much as possible is the way to.
I also like the part where you focused on recovery too, like changing your diet will help you recover better, because that's a big thing with fighters too. Like, they're training so hard, then they want to recover quickly, especially even in the fight, like being able to recover between rounds too. Can you just explain how the plant-based diet will help with that?
It's largely to do with inflammation. So animal products tend to be inflammatory, whereas plant foods are anti-inflammatory. And so, whether it's inflammation in your joints or in your arteries, you need some inflammation when you work out, and that's part of the repair process. But you want to get through that inflammation quickly. And so, for example, if your arteries are inflamed, there's the lining of the arteries called the endothelium, and that produces nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator, which means it opens up your arteries. That allows more blood flow, which means more oxygen, more nutrients getting to the muscles in order to recover quicker. So it's not just about, is there enough protein? There's lots of other things going on. And if you can get through that inflammation quickly, a lot more antioxidants, for example, in plant foods, which are going to help with that oxidative stress that comes from exercise. You want to get through that quickly so that your next workout is beneficial. And that's helping in the very short term, even in between rounds, but also, over time between each training session. So it's an important factor for sure.
Yeah. I thought in the film where you spoke to a bunch of different kinds of athletes, like endurance athletes, strength athletes. I think even though the film was like based on like athletic performance, I think a lot of like the regular people could take a lot away from that. And I think seeing like Arnold Schwarzenegger or people that you would never expect to be plant-based, like really opened the eyes of a lot of people. Have you, I think you've been traveling, right, to promote the movie? Did you go to China?
I was before the lockdown. No, we were going to do a premiere in China. That ended up not happening. The film did release in China. So I went over last year or so to sort out the deal over there, but did not go upon its release. But it was released on Youku, which reportedly has upward of 800 million viewers in China, which is about double what the estimated number of Netflix is worldwide. So it released on Yoku just a couple of months ago, and we don't have exact numbers, but it, based on sort of just one review over there that got 2 million likes and a million comments that were largely positive, it seems like it's taken off there as well.
The reception's good, I guess, but also like China, their diet differs from America. Like how was like the reception in that case? Like, do you think that people in other parts of the world are more receptive to change their diet than Americans?
Well, they are, but in a lot of cases, it's actually going back to sort of more of their original diet. So the typical Chinese and other Asian diets, typical African diets, typical Mexican diets are really largely plant-based. It's really with the sort of insertion of Western diets that have sort of been spreading. There's this notion that if you have a great business deal, what type of restaurant do you go to celebrate? You go to a steak restaurant, and then throughout history, kings and queens and wealthy people could afford animal foods and poor people couldn't. So if you look at different countries, there's a difference between diseases of poverty and diseases of affluence. And so in rich countries, people are getting these sort of lifestyle related diseases. 80% of the major chronic diseases can be prevented or reversed by lifestyle, which is primarily your diet. And I think these other countries are recognizing that their more traditional diets are really healthier than, the sort of Western diets that have been inserted into those countries. And so I think the Chinese especially are very open to switching back. And a few years ago, their government made a statement to reduce meat consumption by 50%, which so they really are taking steps towards shifting to a more plant-based diet, which is great.
I don't know if you didn't really mention this in the film, but I guess now with the coronavirus and everything, like immunity is a big thing. Like, do you know anything about how the plant-based diet affects immunity compared to like meat diet?
Yeah, I mean, plant-based foods have been shown to boost immunity. I think with COVID, and I'm certainly not an expert on that, so I don't want to overstep and make any claims. It seems to be, there has been research that's come out recently showing that a plant-based diet could help with pandemics like the coronavirus, but it's less to do with immunity from it and more to do with the risk factors. And so we know that plant-based diets lead to better outcomes for heart disease, diabetes, metabolic syndrome. And so it's those things that significantly increase your risk from dying from things like COVID. And we also have to remember that, what is the source of most of these pandemics? 3 out of 4 pandemics are of zoonotic origin. That means they came from animals, whether that was farm animals, in the case of the swine flu or the bird flu, or wild animals, which is the most likely culprit, it seems, for the coronavirus. It's to do with farming and selling and consuming animal products. So by switching to a plant-based diet, not only would you be reducing the likelihood of these pandemics occurring, but also reducing your risk and from these, heart disease and diabetes, metabolic syndrome, things like that, which is then going to reduce your risk of dying from these things. So there certainly is a benefit there.
Yeah. I was surprised that it didn't go more in the movie into like the actual meat industry, because like you don't really know what's going into the meat. You don't know what's being fed to the animals and stuff. Like there's a big push, I guess, for like grass-fed meat, and people who wanted to like defend the meat diet. They're saying like, oh, you have to go grass-fed and everything like that. Do you think that, I mean, obviously you've been done well without like targeting the meat industry as well, but do you think that could have been like a point in the movie, like you don't really know what?
Yeah, I mean, it could have been. I think it's, you've got to sort of pick your topic for a documentary and stay focused on it. You've got 90 minutes or less, to really get your point across. I think the issue with focusing on something like factory farming, which is obviously terrible, and it does appear that sort of grass-fed or wild-caught meat, it relatively is better for you than eating this factory farmed. There's actually some evidence looking at grass-fed beef being worse for the environment, despite some of these claims from the regenerative agriculture sector saying that it's actually better. That's been disputed by, people at Oxford and the Future Food Program and things like that. But I think if you point out too much of the flaws with the factory farming, it could lead to people then switching to grass-fed beef, which may be a little bit healthier, but only compared to the factory farm beef. Why not shift over to, getting your protein and your nutrients from plant-based foods? So I think in a way you could accidentally be glorifying grass-fed beef and wild-caught game, where I don't think that those things are healthy either. I mean, relatively they are, but I think there's a lot of inherent issues with meat. There's these heterocyclic amines, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, advanced glycation end products, the saturated fat and cholesterol. These things are all inherent in the meat themselves. And so, yes, there's some benefits to not getting the injected hormones and antibiotics. But I just don't see any benefits to switching away from factory farms to grass-fed and wild-caught game.
You basically targeted like professional athletes, like in the film, and those probably are the people that want to target their diets down to as much as they can to get the most performance. Like if somebody was going to switch over, say a fighter, because that's my thing, but how long would they have to give themselves to see a difference?
Well, for a lot of people, I don't think it's that a great an idea to switch overnight. It depends what you were eating before. So if you're eating a lot of plants before and a bit of salmon and this and that, then maybe you can jump all in. If you're eating a standard Western diet and very little fiber, and over 90% of Americans don't get enough fiber, and if you suddenly jump into a whole food plant-based diet, your microbiome in your gut that has to have time to change. And you could get gastrointestinal distress, like bloating and gas and that type of thing, if you suddenly switch overnight. So for one, I'm not sure it's a great idea to necessarily switch overnight for everybody. Some people it works, some people it doesn't. But for other people, I mean, there's plenty of studies showing within a week of switching over, there's benefits to LDL cholesterol coming down, triglycerides coming down, body fat coming down, water retention coming down. So the results really can happen very quickly. And as you've seen in the film, a single meal can really have an impact on blood flow and on recovery. And so it can happen very, very quickly.
Yeah, and there's more options now than ever before with plant-based restaurants and stuff like that, because that's probably a big thing for people is keeping on it. If there's not enough, a lot of people don't want to cook at home. I mean, now more than ever people are, so it's probably a better time. Summertime, it's easier to get fresh vegetables and all stuff like that. So what do you think about just this accessibility of the diet?
Yeah, I mean, I think the accessibility, like you said, that's going to help create adherence. And adherence to an eating plan is very important. If you can't stick to it, it doesn't matter how healthy it is or how good it is for performance. So I think on the one hand, yeah, there are a lot of options out there, a lot of restaurants, a lot of sort of plant-based food products. On the other hand, you've got to be wary of if you just switched all your diet over to all, processed plant foods, that's not going to be great either. So it's nice to have these plant-based burgers and plant-based milks and plant-based cheeses and all this other stuff. And, it depends on the degree, right? Everything's healthy compared to what? There's a plant-based burger at Carl's Jr. Is that healthy compared to a beef burger at Carl's Jr.? I'd say yes. Is it healthy compared to a lentil stew or a 3-bean chili? I'd say no. And so we want to eat more on the spectrum of whole foods, but it is nice that there's lots of options. If you want to go to a barbecue with your buddies and throw on a Beyond Burger or something, then that's a great option to have.
In the movie, you mentioned the Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz fight, and you put a lot of emphasis on Nate Diaz's diet leading up to the fight. Do you think that people took that as if I eat vegetables, I'll be able to beat a meat eater? Because it's a lot has to do with skill set too.
Well, I don't think, yeah. I mean, people are saying, people have said, oh, the Game Changers makes that if you just switch your diet, you don't have to do any training or anything, you just become an Olympic athlete. I don't think that's a fair assessment. Obviously, these people are training hard. Fighting is not just about your diet. There's a lot of skill involved. But it was Conor himself who said, that it was a battle of energy, that the 2 steaks a day leading up to the fight impacted him. Obviously, there was a weight cut difference. Some people have said, why didn't you include the second fight in the film, the rematch? Well, we almost did include that because Conor did say he cut down on his meat consumption after that fight. And it was also a very close fight. So it actually would have been a good for our story to say, look, he cut down on meat and he did better. We're not trying to say that it was only the diet, but I mean, 5 years ago, if you'd have said that a plant-based athlete could be doing well in the UFC or any sport, people would just think you were crazy. And I think the conversation has changed. So people are pushing back and saying, well, it's a little bit harder to get the protein, or a little bit harder to be plant-based and be a professional athlete. Even though I think that's not true at all. I think there's benefits, and I think it's just as easy once you get used to it. But it's changed the conversation from previously people saying, there's no way you can do this on a plant-based diet. Now they're just saying, okay, you can be a top-level athlete. There's no denying that. So I think we've changed the conversation regardless. And yeah, it's not just down to diet. It's down to hard training and focus and smart training. But diet is a very important factor. And like you said, a lot of athletes still eat a bunch of junk food and they don't recognize that that's really important. But if you look at athletes that are doing really well, especially in the long term, those athletes, they've got a longevity of their career. Those athletes do tend to be caring more about their diet and lifestyle, and I think it's extremely important.
Mm-hmm. And especially with fighting too, like you have all different size athletes. You have heavyweights, you have flyweights, you have women fighting, men fighting. Like everybody could benefit from this, right?
Oh yeah, I think, and it doesn't have to. You don't have to be an athlete. The same biological mechanisms that impact performance also impact our health. So endothelial function in our arteries, inflammation, these types of things are inherent in, the risks for the diseases. We want to improve those things and cut down on our risks for diseases. And just having more energy and feeling better. I think everyone's an athlete, whether they're a mom, like picking up their kid and running around, or just having energy at work and focus. I think there's, so many benefits to getting healthy and having a healthier lifestyle that everyone should be considering. Exercise, stress reduction, good sleep, not smoking, and a healthy diet as well.
So what's next for you personally? Is there going to be another film made? Are you working on anything else? Are you going to go back to the UFC fighting? I don't know.
Yeah, no, not fighting. I'm definitely retired from that. I'm still training. Well, not with this lockdown, but I'm still training. Various government agencies in combatives and martial arts. But the Game Changers impact, the impact of the Game Changers film was run through our Game Changers Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit. And so, after the film, we put the website up, gamechangersmovie.com, and that's got on recipes and resources. And so right now we're just focusing on the foundation and continuing to work on initiatives to promote healthy eating, give people the resources. It's one thing being inspired by the film, and another thing changing a habit that you've had for 30 or 40 years and changing your diet, right? So I'm just going to continue speaking on healthy eating, continuing looking at the evidence, and if evidence changed, I would change my opinion. But right now, for me, evidence-based eating means plant-based eating. So I'll continue to promote that.
Yeah, that's great that you have resources for everybody, because it's very simple to just watch a movie and then immediately it's over and then you're going to head out to dinner and just all out of your head, So it's good that you have recipes and stuff that people could go on and check out for themselves.
Yeah, and we're working on some initiatives right now with the foundation that we'll be announcing in a few months, sort of more things for people going forward.
I think that's it for me. So I really appreciate it. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. And maybe we can catch up in the next couple months or whatever after all this is over. And if you do get to go to China and all that, it'd be awesome. Sure. All right, great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. Great. Okay, thanks so much, Nicole. Bye-bye.